Donald Trump's footsteps echoed heavily in the marbled corridors of the White House, a steady, resonant sound that spoke of power and finality. In a spacious, richly appointed office, the air was thick with tension as he awaited the arrival of Karoline Leavitt, his trusted staffer whose performance had recently come under intense scrutiny. The room, filled with the muted hum of political ambition and the sharp tang of discontent, was about to bear witness to a confrontation that would alter the course of their intertwined destinies. Karoline entered the room quietly, her eyes immediately meeting the stern, unwavering gaze of the president. She had served in the White House for years, gradually carving out a reputation as someone who could handle the pressures of high office with grace. Yet today, there was a heaviness in her step, a hesitance that betrayed the burden of the expectations placed upon her shoulders. In that moment, every detail, the subtle tightening of her jaw, the way her fingers clutched the strap of her bag, spoke volumes of the inner turmoil she felt as she braced herself for what was to come. "Karoline," Trump said, his voice a mixture of irritation and cold determination. "Please, take a seat." His tone brooked no argument, each syllable punctuating the finality of the moment. Karoline's heart pounded as she obeyed, sitting carefully in the leather chair positioned across from the large mahogany desk that seemed to dominate the room. The silence stretched for a few agonizing seconds before Trump continued, his words deliberate and heavy with disapproval. "I have been reviewing the performance reports, the feedback from every corner of this administration," he began, his tone rising imperceptibly. "There have been serious concerns about your handling of critical assignments. Mistakes have been made, and trust has been broken." His eyes, burning with a fiery intensity, searched her face for signs of remorse or defiance. Karoline felt each word as a physical blow, her mind racing to recall every misstep, every moment when her judgment might have faltered under the crushing weight of expectations. "Mr. President," she started, her voice trembling as she attempted to interject. "I have always striven to meet the high standards you set. If there are issues—" "Do not offer excuses," Trump interrupted sharply, his voice echoing off the high ceilings. "This is not a negotiation. I expected nothing less than excellence from you, and what I have seen is subpar performance at best. I trusted you with responsibilities that required both precision and unwavering loyalty, and you have disappointed me." His words were like daggers, each one cutting deeper into the fragile veneer of her composure. Karoline's mind raced back over the months of relentless work, the long hours, and the countless crises that had beset the administration. She recalled moments of intense pressure, when every decision seemed to hang in the balance between success and utter failure. Yet in her defense, she had always done her utmost to ensure that the administration's goals were met. Now, as she sat before Trump's unyielding glare, all her efforts seemed to have been reduced to mere insufficiency in the eyes of a man known for his intolerance of any perceived weakness. The room felt smaller, the walls closing in as the gravity of the situation became increasingly palpable. Trump leaned forward, his eyes narrowing as he continued, "Karoline, this isn't just about a few minor errors. This is about a pattern of behavior that suggests you are no longer fit for the responsibilities entrusted to you." He paused, letting the words settle like a shroud over the room. "Effective immediately, you are relieved of your duties." A heavy silence ensued as Karoline's mind struggled to process the news. For a moment, time itself seemed to slow, and the only sound was the erratic beating of her heart. The words hung in the air like a verdict, irreversible and final. She had known that her performance had been under scrutiny, yet the abruptness of this pronouncement left her reeling. "You're firing me," she managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper. Trump's response was cold and unyielding. "Yes, Karoline. I have no choice. In this administration, we cannot afford the luxury of mistakes. The success of this country depends on our ability to maintain the highest standards, and I can no longer count on you." His tone was final, leaving no room for negotiation or further explanation. Karoline's eyes glistened with unshed tears, not solely out of sadness, but from the bitter realization of how quickly fortunes could change in the unforgiving arena of power. "But I've given everything to this office," she said softly, her voice laced with a mixture of disbelief and sorrow. "I've sacrificed so much, time, personal life, even my dreams, everything to serve this country under your leadership." Trump's expression hardened further, his face becoming a mask of stern resolve. "Sacrifice does not grant you immunity from accountability," he retorted. "In politics, results matter more than intentions. You have consistently fallen short of the mark." The accusation was delivered with the finality of a gavel strike in a court of law, leaving no room for any rebuttal or appeal. As the conversation unfolded, memories of past triumphs and failures began to swirl in Karoline's mind. She remembered the early days of her career in the White House, when the promise of change and progress had filled the corridors with hope. There had been moments of camaraderie and shared purpose, when every challenge was met with determination and optimism. But over time, the relentless demands and the constant pressure had eroded her spirit, leaving her isolated and burdened by a mounting sense of inadequacy. Now, facing this moment of reckoning, she wondered if all the sacrifices had truly been worth it. Trump continued, his voice losing none of its steely authority as he listed the missteps that, in his eyes, had led to this inevitable outcome. "Your handling of the recent briefing, your failure to anticipate critical developments, the miscommunication with key allies, all these factors have contributed to a breakdown in operational efficiency." With each accusation, the weight of his words pressed down on Karoline, forcing her to confront the possibility that her efforts had been in vain. In that fateful moment, a subtle shift occurred in the atmosphere. The tension, once a mere simmering undercurrent, escalated into an electric charge that seemed to vibrate in the very air around them. Karoline's eyes, now brimming with a quiet determination despite the heartbreak, met Trump's gaze. "I am aware of the challenges we faced," she said steadily, her voice gaining strength. "I made mistakes, yes, but I also learned from them. I believed in the vision of this administration, and I dedicated myself to it wholeheartedly. Don't you see that I was trying to do my best in an environment where every decision could have monumental consequences?" For a brief moment, the room was silent, the only sound the soft rustling of papers and the distant hum of the White House itself, as if the building were a silent witness to the struggle unfolding within its walls. Trump's face contorted with a mixture of anger and regret. "Effort is not enough in this game, Karoline," he said slowly. "The stakes are too high. One slip, one oversight, and the consequences could be catastrophic. I cannot risk further errors, not with the eyes of the world upon us." Her mind raced as she tried to piece together the fragments of their shared history, the successes and the setbacks, the moments of unity and the inevitable fractures. "You built this administration on the promise of innovation, of pushing boundaries and taking risks," she reminded him, her tone earnest and imploring. "And I was there, striving to make that vision a reality. How can you dismiss all of that now, simply because things did not go perfectly?" Trump's eyes flickered with a hint of something that might have been regret, but it was quickly masked by his characteristic steely resolve. "Perfection is not a luxury we can afford, Karoline," he said, his voice unyielding. "In this line of work, there is no room for sentimentality or second chances. Every decision, every action, has to be measured against its outcome. And the outcomes have not been favorable." The conversation took on the cadence of a well-rehearsed debate, each word a carefully calculated move in a high-stakes game. Karoline found herself reaching deep within, summoning memories of past triumphs, of times when her perseverance had turned the tide in seemingly insurmountable situations. "I have learned, and I have grown," she stated, her voice imbued with the quiet strength of someone who has weathered many storms. "I know that I have made errors, but I also know that I can do better if given the chance. Is there truly no way to salvage what we have built together?" For a fleeting moment, the president's stern features softened, as if the passion of his own past battles flickered behind those hard eyes. But the moment was ephemeral. "The decision is made, Karoline," he replied firmly. "It is not up for debate. You have served this office long enough, and now it is time for you to step aside. The future of this administration demands unwavering commitment and impeccable performance. I can no longer count on you to deliver that. The finality of his words settled like a heavy fog over the room, leaving Karoline with the crushing realization that her journey in the White House was at an end. The silence that followed was punctuated by the slow, measured rhythm of her own breathing, a stark contrast to the rapid beating of her heart. In that silence, she felt the weight of every missed opportunity, every moment of hesitation that had led her to this point. A twist of fate, however, was lurking in the shadows of that fateful day. Unbeknownst to both of them, a phone call had just come through to the president's secure line, a call that would soon unravel a web of conspiracy and hidden agendas that extended far beyond their personal conflict. As Trump reached for the phone, his hand trembling ever so slightly, Karoline's eyes widened in recognition of the gravity of the situation. "Mr. President, what is that?" she asked, her voice quivering with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Trump glanced at the phone, his expression darkening as he answered the call. "Yes," he said curtly, his tone shifting from the cold finality of dismissal to something more urgent and guarded. The conversation that ensued was a rapid flurry of coded language and hushed urgency, details slipping through in fragments. Karoline listened intently, the words, national security, classified, and unprecedented threat echoing in her ears. It became clear that the stakes of the situation had suddenly expanded beyond their personal grievances. As the conversation continued, Trump's demeanor changed visibly. The fury that had defined his confrontation with Karoline was replaced by a focused intensity, a recognition that the challenges before him were now larger than any personal vendetta or bureaucratic error. "I understand," he said into the phone, his voice now laced with the gravitas of a leader facing an imminent crisis. "I will handle it." He ended the call abruptly, his eyes locking onto Karoline's once more. "This isn't over, Karoline," he declared, his tone shifting from the cold finality of dismissal to a more enigmatic warning. "There are forces at work here that go far beyond the mistakes you've made. You may be leaving this office, but the events of today will have repercussions that neither of us can foresee." The sudden shift in tone left Karoline both stunned and uncertain. The room, once charged solely with the bitterness of personal failure, now pulsed with the threat of a larger, more dangerous conflict. "What do you mean?" she asked softly, her earlier defiance replaced by a cautious curiosity. Trump hesitated before responding, as if weighing how much to reveal. "There are elements within our government, even within the intelligence community, that are grappling with a crisis of unprecedented magnitude. Decisions made today will echo for years to come. And while you may have been removed from this office, you are still a part of this story, a story that is far from over." Karoline felt a cold shiver run down her spine as the implications of his words sank in. The conversation that had begun as a personal rebuke was now morphing into something more ominous and complex. As she sat there, grappling with the dual weight of her dismissal and the looming threat hinted at by the president, her mind raced with possibilities. Had she been a pawn in a larger game all along? Were the mistakes he cited merely convenient pretexts to cover up a far more intricate power struggle within the halls of power? The president, sensing her inner turmoil, softened his tone slightly. "Karoline, I need you to understand that everything is bigger than either of us. The decisions we make, the errors we commit, they ripple out and affect the very fabric of our nation. You have been a loyal servant, and I acknowledge that. But the demands of the moment require swift and uncompromising action." His gaze bore into her, conveying both the weight of his responsibility and the bitter sting of personal regret. "I am entrusting you with a final task. Before you leave, I want you to gather all the files and reports related to the recent developments. There are aspects of our operations that need to be handed over with utmost care and precision. I need you to ensure that nothing falls through the cracks, even in your departure." The request, unexpected in its nuance, added another layer of complexity to the unfolding drama. Karoline's initial shock gave way to a sense of duty, a lingering spark of the idealism that had once driven her to serve in the White House. Despite the sting of dismissal, she knew that the challenges hinted at by Trump were far more dangerous than any personal slight. "I understand," she replied, her voice steady despite the tumult of emotions swirling within her. "I will complete the task as instructed." For a long, heavy moment, the two remained locked in a silent understanding. The room, once dominated by the echoes of their confrontation, now hummed with the quiet urgency of a situation that demanded both immediate action and long-term vigilance. Karoline's mind was a tumult of regret, resolve, and a dawning awareness of the intricate web of responsibilities that still bound her to the very institution she was now about to leave. As the hours passed and the gravity of the situation became increasingly clear, Karoline set to work with a meticulous fervor. Each document she gathered, each file she organized, was a reminder of both her successes and failures, a tangible testament to the countless hours of labor that had defined her tenure. Outside the room, the pulse of the nation beat on, oblivious to the inner turmoil that now gripped the corridors of power. The White House, a symbol of enduring authority and relentless ambition, was preparing to face a threat that could shake the very foundations of governance. In the midst of her work, Karoline's thoughts drifted back to the early days of her career, a time when the promise of change and progress had filled every corner of the White House with hope and excitement. She recalled the moments of camaraderie, the long nights spent strategizing with colleagues who believed in a shared vision, and the thrill of being part of something larger than herself. Yet now, those memories were tinged with the bittersweet taste of loss. The man who had once inspired confidence and possibility now stood before her as a stern arbiter of accountability, his decisions leaving indelible marks on both her career and her soul. As dusk settled over Washington, the atmosphere in the White House grew heavier still. In a quiet, dimly lit corridor, Trump himself was engaged in hushed consultations with trusted advisors, his earlier confrontation with Karoline a distant echo amid discussions of national security and impending crises. The lines between personal grievances and political imperatives blurred in a way that left everyone, including Karoline, questioning where loyalty ended and duty began. Amid this swirling uncertainty, whispers of dissent and murmurs of conspiracy began to filter through the ranks, hinting at the presence of unseen forces manipulating events from the shadows. It was in this climate of uncertainty that Karoline discovered a series of documents that suggested a clandestine network within the government, one that had been working behind the scenes to shape the narrative of recent events. The files contained cryptic references to covert operations, to meetings held in secret rooms far from the public eye, and to a network of influential figures whose true allegiances remained shrouded in mystery. With each page she turned, Karoline felt herself drawn deeper into a labyrinth of intrigue and deception. The revelation was as exhilarating as it was terrifying, a reminder that in the world of high-stakes politics, nothing was ever as it seemed. Her discovery presented her with a daunting choice. On one hand, there was the bitter reality of her dismissal and the pain of being cast aside by the very person she had served so diligently. On the other, there was the tantalizing possibility of uncovering a truth that might shake the foundations of the establishment itself. As she meticulously cross-referenced dates, names, and locations, Karoline realized that these documents hinted at a conspiracy that extended far beyond administrative incompetence. The pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place, suggesting that her removal might not have been solely about performance, but also about silencing someone who had come too close to exposing a dangerous secret. In the quiet isolation of that fateful night, as the White House settled into an uneasy slumber, Karoline's mind churned with questions and hypotheses. Who were the real architects of the crisis? How deep did the conspiracies run? And most importantly, what role had she unwittingly played in a drama that spanned far beyond her own career? With a sense of grim determination, she resolved that once her task was complete, she would pursue the truth, no matter where it led. The weight of responsibility pressed down on her shoulders, but so too did the spark of conviction that she might yet make a difference. Morning arrived with a pall of uncertainty hanging over the White House. The routine bustle of daily activity was now underscored by an unspoken tension, as if every member of the staff sensed that the events of the previous day had been only the prologue to something far more consequential. In the quiet moments before the day's work began in earnest, Karoline took a final, lingering look at the documents that had upended her world. They were a testament to both her diligence and the burdens of truth, a burden she was now determined to carry, even if it meant walking a path fraught with danger and uncertainty. As she prepared to leave the office, Karoline felt a profound mix of sorrow and resolve. The graceful, determined woman who had once navigated the labyrinthine corridors of power now found herself at a crossroads, her future uncertain but her purpose clearer than ever. The dismissal from her post was not merely an end, but the beginning of a journey into a realm where loyalty, truth, and sacrifice were intertwined in ways she had never imagined. Stepping into the cool morning air, she vowed silently that she would honor everything she had learned and every hardship she had endured by seeking out the truth behind the shadows of the White House. Outside, the city of Washington bustled with life, unaware of the quiet revolution that was about to begin. Karoline's departure was not a retreat but rather a cautious advance into a world of hidden agendas and dangerous revelations. The documents she had uncovered clutched tightly in her hand were both a burden and a beacon, a call to arms for anyone who believed that even in the darkest corridors of power, truth could still prevail. With each determined step, she left behind the familiar halls of the White House, stepping into a future that promised both peril and the possibility of redemption. In the weeks that followed, whispers of dissent and conspiracy began to emerge from unlikely corners. The story of Karoline's dismissal became a catalyst for a series of investigations, as journalists and insiders alike began to connect the dots between her removal and the mysterious network of covert operations that had come to light. What had initially appeared to be a simple case of administrative error was now being reframed as a calculated move to silence a potential whistleblower. The revelation sparked a firestorm of debate in political circles, with some hailing Karoline as a brave martyr of truth, while others dismissed the claims as the work of desperate opportunists seeking to undermine the administration. Amid the tumult of public opinion and behind closed doors, Trump remained an inscrutable figure. His public statements continued to be sharp and uncompromising, his rhetoric unaltered by the growing controversy. Yet behind the confident facade, there was an undeniable undercurrent of anxiety, a sense that the forces he had unleashed might one day come back to haunt him. In private meetings with his closest advisors, he acknowledged that the situation was far more complex than anyone had imagined. "We are facing challenges on multiple fronts," he confided in a low, measured tone. "The events of the past few days have exposed vulnerabilities that must be addressed immediately. We must act swiftly and decisively, or risk losing control of the narrative." Even as these deliberations unfolded in the highest echelons of power, Karoline's journey took her into unexpected territory. She found herself drawn into a clandestine network of like-minded individuals, journalists, former intelligence officers, and independent investigators, who were equally determined to uncover the truth. Together, they began to piece together a mosaic of evidence that pointed not only to internal corruption but also to the involvement of external actors seeking to destabilize the government for their own gain. Every new discovery added layers of complexity to an already convoluted narrative, challenging long-held assumptions and forcing everyone involved to confront the uncomfortable reality that nothing was as it seemed. As Karoline delved deeper into the mystery, she found that her own past, once a source of quiet pride, now held clues to the broader conspiracy. Long-forgotten interactions with influential figures, subtle hints in offhand remarks during late-night meetings, and even the obscure contents of archived files began to form a pattern that suggested her dismissal had been orchestrated with meticulous precision. The revelation was both exhilarating and terrifying. She realized that her own fate was intertwined with that of the nation, that the choices she had made over the years might have unwittingly placed her at the center of a conflict that reached far beyond the confines of the White House. In one pivotal encounter, Karoline met with an anonymous source in a secluded cafe far from the prying eyes of Washington's corridors of power. The source, shrouded in mystery, revealed details that corroborated the hints found in the documents she had uncovered. "There are forces at work here that you cannot begin to imagine," the source murmured, their voice low and urgent. "You have been chosen to see beyond the veil, to understand the true nature of the game being played." The words resonated deeply with Karoline, igniting a resolve that would carry her through the darkest of times. The meeting, brief as it was, marked a turning point in her journey, from a fallen staffer seeking redemption to a determined seeker of truth prepared to risk everything for the sake of exposing the corruption festering at the heart of power. In the ensuing months, as investigations deepened and allegiances shifted, Karoline found herself caught in a maelstrom of intrigue and peril. Her every move was shadowed by unseen forces, and anonymous threats began to arrive, warning her to abandon her quest for truth. Yet with each warning, her determination grew stronger. The pursuit of justice, she believed, was a cause greater than any single individual, and the sacrifices required were a small price to pay for the integrity of the nation. Every night, as she pored over documents and compiled evidence, she was haunted by the memory of that fateful day in the office, the day when Trump had dismissed her, not only from her position but from the very life she had known. It was a moment that had shattered her world and set her on an irreversible course. In the final, heart-wrenching climax of her journey, Karoline uncovered irrefutable evidence of a vast, deeply entrenched network of corruption that reached the highest levels of power. The documents, now meticulously organized and corroborated by multiple sources, painted a picture of a shadow government manipulating events behind the scenes, a conspiracy that had orchestrated her dismissal as part of a broader strategy to silence dissent and maintain control. With the evidence in hand, Karoline faced a choice. To remain in the shadows and protect herself, or to step forward and expose the truth, even if it meant endangering everything she held dear. The weight of the decision was immense, and for many long, sleepless nights, she wrestled with the implications. In the end, her conscience prevailed. She arranged to meet with a trusted investigative journalist, knowing that the revelations she was about to share could ignite a firestorm of change. The meeting was set in a discreet location, far from the familiar halls of power. Under the cover of night, Karoline handed over the compiled evidence, her hands steady despite the overwhelming gravity of the moment. The journalist, eyes widening with each new piece of information, promised that the story would be told with the full weight of its truth. As Karoline left the safe house that night, she felt a profound mix of relief and trepidation. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with risks and the potential for severe retribution. Yet in her heart, she knew that the pursuit of truth was a battle worth fighting, even if it meant becoming a target in a war against the unseen forces that sought to control the narrative. In the days and weeks that followed, the revelations sparked an unprecedented public outcry. Protests erupted in the streets of Washington, and news outlets around the world scrambled to piece together the details of the scandal. Trump, ever the figure of controversy, remained defiant in public, his rhetoric as sharp as ever, even as whispers of his involvement in the cover-up grew louder. The nation found itself divided, with some hailing Karoline as a hero for her bravery and others condemning her actions as reckless and dangerous. Amid the chaos, the truth had a way of emerging from the murk of political maneuvering, and slowly, the intricate tapestry of deceit began to unravel. In a dramatic turn of events that none could have foreseen, several high-ranking officials were called to testify before a special committee tasked with investigating the scandal. The hearings, televised for the nation's eyes, revealed details that sent shockwaves through the political establishment. The evidence was irrefutable, and as the testimonies unfolded, the hidden network of conspiracies was laid bare for all to see. Karoline watched from a distance, a silent observer to the unfolding drama. Though she had long since left the corridors of power, her actions had set in motion a chain of events that would redefine the future of the nation. As the final chapters of the investigation were written, a sense of cautious hope began to emerge from the ruins of betrayal and corruption. The nation, scarred by the revelations but united in its desire for reform, began to chart a path toward healing and renewal. Karoline, now an emblem of resilience and unyielding courage, found herself at the center of a movement for accountability and transparency. Though the road ahead was long and fraught with challenges, her journey served as a powerful reminder that even in the darkest corners of power, the light of truth could eventually prevail. The day the full story broke, the nation held its breath. The public revelations were met with a mixture of shock, outrage, and a fervent demand for justice. Trump's administration was forced to confront the realities of its own internal decay, and calls for sweeping reforms echoed through the halls of Congress. In the aftermath of the scandal, Karoline's name became synonymous with integrity and sacrifice, a testament to the fact that one person's courage could indeed change the course of history. Standing before a crowd of supporters at a modest rally, Karoline addressed the nation with quiet conviction. "I did not set out to be a hero," she said softly, her voice steady and resolute. "I simply believed in the truth, in the promise of a better future for all of us. Today, we stand at a crossroads, faced with the challenge of rebuilding our institutions on the foundations of accountability and transparency. It will not be easy, but I have faith that together, we can restore the trust that has been broken." Her words, delivered with a blend of humility and fierce determination, resonated deeply with those who had followed her journey. As the rally dispersed into a hopeful yet uncertain future, the echoes of that day continued to reverberate throughout the nation. The battle for truth, for accountability, was far from over. Yet in the heart of every citizen who had witnessed the unraveling of a decades-long cover-up, there burned a renewed sense of purpose, a belief that even in the face of overwhelming adversity, the pursuit of justice was a cause worth fighting for. And so, the saga of Karoline Leavitt, once a loyal staffer dismissed in a moment of harsh finality, transformed into a legend of perseverance and moral courage. Her story was not one of defeat but of rebirth, a testament to the enduring power of truth and the unyielding spirit of those who dare to challenge the status quo. In the annals of history, her name would forever be remembered not merely as a casualty of political ambition, but as a beacon for all who believed that the cost of silence was too high, and that the price of truth was one worth paying, no matter the personal sacrifice. The tumult of those events, though eventually settling into the background of political discourse, left an indelible mark on the national conscience. In the quiet moments of reflection that followed, citizens from all walks of life found themselves asking the same fundamental questions: what price do we pay for accountability? How far must we go to ensure that our leaders remain true to the principles of justice? And, in the end, can the scars of betrayal ever truly heal when the forces of power seem so insurmountable? As the years passed, the legacy of that fateful confrontation and the subsequent revelations continued to inspire debates in academic halls, dinner tables, and political forums. The story of Karoline Leavitt became a symbol, a reminder that no matter how deeply entrenched corruption might be, the courage of one individual could spark a movement, igniting the flames of change in even the most oppressive of environments. In time, her journey served as both a cautionary tale and a rallying cry, urging future generations to hold fast to their convictions and to remain vigilant in the face of injustice. In the final reckoning, the events that had unfolded were etched into the collective memory of a nation forever altered by the pursuit of truth. The echoes of that day, of a fiery confrontation and a courageous quest for justice, resonated as a timeless reminder that even in the most formidable corridors of power, the light of integrity could shine through, guiding the way to a future where accountability, transparency, and the unassailable strength of conviction would prevail over the shadows of deceit.